So up next in the hot seat for episode 11 of today's True Pro Wrestling Story, we have Marty Scurll, a man of many monikers, from the Villain to El Villanisto to Party Marty to Umbrella Man. Interestingly enough, because if you were to take a gander at his on-screen persona, you start to see why that is. His gimmick, his character kind of reminds me of one of those old diabolical villains, the likes of which you probably see in the Professor Layton series, which I always thought was pretty cool whenever I were to see him across my screen. Before we get rolling on that though, this is True Pro Wrestling Stories. I am JTR Raps, and this is episode 11. If you're a returning subscriber, welcome back. I appreciate you. If you're new, come on in, stay a while, and listen to yet another episode of True Pro Wrestling Story. Again, episode 11. This is Marty Scurll. Come as you are. Consider leaving as a subscriber. Cue the intro. So, how many of y'all are familiar with the career of Marty Scurll? If I'm being honest, before I started researching this case, I wasn't too familiar with his career path. One, because I didn't really follow Ring of Honor like that. I wasn't an avid watcher, which is where I know him from and where I'm sure he created his buzz. Besides that, I know him to be a topic of controversy. Now, what's that, you say? Thought you never asked. We're going to talk about that, but first, let's talk about Marty Scurll. So, Marty Scurll is a professional wrestler from the UK, Cambridge if I'm not mistaken. Since he professionally debuted in or around 2005, he's built up quite the impressive resume. If you happen to follow his career path, you know that he at one point or another has come up on the radar of WWE and AEW. We'll get to that later. So he made his rounds all across the British pro wrestling circuit, from Premier Promotions, which is where I believe he debuted, to Insane Pro Wrestling or IPW in the UK, Frontier Wrestling Alliance, Progress based out in London, and a slew of other wrestling promotions. During his heyday in the UK wrestling scene, he crossed paths in some shape, form, or fashion with the likes of established pro wrestlers like Zack Sabre Jr., with whom he was a co-IPW UK Tag Team Champion as leaders of the New School, Wade Barrett and Nick Aldis, to name a few. In or around 2012, interestingly enough, he appeared in TNA, a reality-based TV series by the name of British Boot Camp. Now, to give you a brief synopsis of the show, it was to document the careers of 4 British professional wrestling hopefuls with aspirations of acquiring a contract with TNA. Jeremy Borash, who's known for his work as an announcer in TNA, produced the show in its entirety, from what I understand. Rockstar Spud, aka Drake Maverick, who you know in WWE, the Blossom Twins, Hana and Holly, and last but not least, Marty Scurll himself, all competing for a contract. Terry Bollea, aka Hulk Hogan, and Mark Rocco, better known as Black Tiger in New Japan Pro Wrestling, were their mentors on the show. In a 6-person tag team match between the team of Marty Scurll and the Blossom Twins against Knockouts Gail Kim, Tara, and Jesse, Scurll actually injured himself while doing a suicide dive. Now, it sounded pretty brutal. From what I understand, it was a horrific injury. He attempted the suicide dive. However, he landed into the metal barricade face first. Now, that was from a fan account who was in attendance at the show. Apparently, this match had to follow Kurt Angle and Samoa Joe, so they weren't even that pumped for it. Long story short, Marty Scurll did not land a deal with TNA. Rockstar Spud, however, did go on to take the whole thing and make quite a name for himself in TNA. Rightfully so, because he was getting over, and that's who the people were coming to see. And this was the pilot, evidently, because there was a second season which followed 12 aspiring British pro wrestlers. I tend to keep my ear to the pro wrestling metaverse, but like Ring of Honor, I did not follow TNA like that at the time. Now, Scurll went on to have successful stints in Progress, PWG, Ring of Honor, which is where I think he really started to create that buzz for himself before venturing off into other promotions in the US and overseas, from New Japan to the National Wrestling Alliance. He's captured the IWGP Junior Heavyweight Championship. He's billed around 5'9", 195 pounds or 88 kilograms. The NWA British Championship, World Television and 6-man Tag Team Championships in Ring of Honor, and a bottomless list of accolades in the business. I mentioned AEW earlier. If you're unfamiliar with the Elite's origin story, you're probably more familiar with the Bullet Club. Allow me to explain. Between New Japan and Ring of Honor, Scurll was a member of that stable along with Cody Rhodes, Adam Page, the Young Bucks, and Kenny Omega. If I'm not mistaken, Kota Ibushi was also a member of that group. The friction in the group, which led to an internal struggle. When you have that much talent, there's going to be a clash of egos, right? They all splintered off, having formed the Elite. However, as you know, everyone except for Scurll and Kota Ibushi left Ring of Honor and ultimately went on to create All Elite Wrestling. From what I've learned, WWE was interested at one point or another. This is according to Dave Meltzer. However, Scurll remained in Ring of Honor where he was comfortable and landed a prominent position in the company. In 2020, Scurll signed a multi-year contract as head booker for the promotion. This is where the walls started to crumble like Jericho, so to speak. Trigger warning, I'm about to say some things that may contain disturbing allegations, may be graphic, so please brace yourselves for what I'm about to describe. So at the height of his success, an unnamed woman who was training to be a pro wrestler came forward and made some accusations of SA while intoxicated against Mr. Scurll back in 2015. You may have noticed a quote in the thumbnail. This is her account of what happened. He spent a while saying to me that we should go back together. Let's go back to the hotel. Let's, you know what. Now I'm going to paraphrase the rest of it. We were outside of my room. It was quiet. We were in an empty hallway. He takes his thing out, tells me to SUCK. I'm 16 at the time. He's getting me into position so he can stick his unprotected thing in me. I'm repeatedly telling him that I'm sorry and I'm a virgin, but before he could penetrate me, my friend arrived and ordered Scurll to leave. Now, allegedly, her father, who worked in IPW at the time, backed up these claims by producing text messages between him and Scurll. In a follow-on statement made by Scurll in response to these accusations, which were quite damning, he admitted to having consensual sex with the unnamed woman, but states he was unaware of her age until after the encounter. Now, some people are already aware that 16 is the age of legal consent in the UK. Now, again, that's another topic on its own. I'd rather not open the floodgates here. Bottom line, Ring of Honor's parent company, Sinclair Broadcasting, launched an internal investigation and they would mutually part ways with Scurll in the beginning of 2021. Sky was the limit for Marty Scurll, but what's he been up to lately? Well, he took a brief hiatus, parting ways with Ring of Honor in January of 2021. He was reportedly scheduled to go on the road with New Japan, but the news didn't sit well with the fans nor New Japan Pro Wrestling talent. It was reported by Super J-Cast that Scurll was dropped from all New Japan Pro Wrestling programming. In September, CWA in Puerto Rico announced that Scurll would be making an appearance in the promotion for their Halloween Fan Fest, and after an interview with Contralona, Scurll announced that he would be going forward with CWA long term. Now, he's already competed in a match for the promotion, and he's competing in varying promotions overseas as documented in vlogs on his official YouTube channel. That wraps up this week's episode of True Pro Wrestling Stories. This one was kind of short. However, I'd like to hear your comments in the comment section. What are your opinions on this speaking out accusation with Marty Scurll? I'd love to hear what you have to say. Leave a like, share, subscribe, and until the next one, I'm out of here. Stay safe.